This is my Aston Martin Vantage, and it's one of the most craziest cars I've ever owned. Now, owning a car like this would not be possible if it wasn't for car finance. But financing a car like this is not cheap. You're looking at monthly payments well over the average mortgage, which for some of you is going to sound absolutely bonkers. But it does make this noise. But let's not kid ourselves, you don't just go to a dealership and finance a car this expensive. It can take years. You start right at the bottom and finance your first car for a couple £100 a month. Then every 2 years you upgrade and you say to yourself, oh, well, it's only an extra £100 a month. Then before you know it, 10 years later, all those extra £100 per car finance have added up, and you may find yourself with something costing you over £1,000 a month. And this is what I call the finance rabbit hole. But is this a bad hole to fall down, or could it be one of the best decisions of your life? Keep watching and I'm going to explain to you how car finance can be a really, really good thing, or it can be a complete disaster. Now, to understand this further, let me take you all the way back and show you how I went from this all the way to this incredible Aston Martin Vantage. So it all started when I passed my driving test and I could not wait to buy my first car. I went straight to the bank, I got a bank loan, and I bought a red Toyota Celica, which at the time I thought was the coolest car in the world. So then I had the Celica for about 3 years, and then it was time for a new car. I was earning a bit more money, I wanted to get a bigger loan and buy something just a bit faster, a bit more fun. So I went to a Audi dealership to look at a used Audi TT. It wasn't too expensive, it was used, it had quite a few miles. And then when I got there, well, what happened was, in a nutshell, is the sales executive managed to talk me into buying a brand new Audi TT on a PCP finance package because the monthly payments were lower than what the loan was going to be if I bought the used one. So I was like, a brand new car? Hell yeah. You know, I was quite young and I was naive at the time, and I remember being sat there at the dealership with my calculator working out if I could afford this car. You know, I was paying my mum's mortgage, I was paying rent for my flat, and don't do this. If you can't afford the car, or you can just afford the monthly payments, don't buy it, because there's going to be lots of extra costs that you might not be prepared for. But you know, I was young and I was really into my cars, and I went for it, and when I picked this car up, it was absolutely incredible. I was so pleased. So then another 3 years later, the TT was then coming towards the end of its PCP. So I went to Audi, and the new Audi TT had just come out. This was the Mark III model, and it was really revolutionary at the time. It was the first Audi to have the digital cockpit in the dash, and as soon as I drove it, I just fell in love with it. And this time now I had a bit more driving experience. Things have been going well at work. I'd worked my way a bit more up the ladder, and I wanted to go for the TTS model, which is the performance model. I think it had around 300 horsepower, which for me back then was absolutely insane. And I just loved this car. And I sat down, I did what I did with the white one. I got my calculator out, I worked out if I could afford it, and I could just about afford it. It was around £450 or £480 a month, I think I was paying for it. But after I'd had the TTS for a few years and I was ready for something new, and the TTS had inspired me so much to work really hard because it gave me a taste of the type of cars that I could be driving. You know, you go to the dealership and you sit in the car and you think, God, if I work really hard for just a bit more per month, I could actually own this car. So I went to Mercedes, and this time I wanted to look at a C-Class. I was feeling a little bit more grown up. I was just turning 30, and I just wanted something that was fast, luxurious, comfortable, you know, and looked really cool. So I was drawn to the C300 Coupe. So I ended up buying a white C300 Coupe, and it worked out, I think, about £550 per month. So it was about £100 more than the TTS. But really, at the time when I was buying that car, what I really wanted was a C43. I wanted an AMG, but I just couldn't afford it at the time. But I regretted it. I had the C300 for only a year, and then I went back to the dealership and said, can I just change this to a C43? I don't care how much it costs. And it actually didn't work out too much more, and the C300 was probably the car I owned for the least amount. It's actually, if I think about my cars, it's the car I owned for the least amount of time out of all of the cars. So we sold the C300 and we picked up the C43, and the rest is history, because the C43 was the car that really got me into YouTube. I started making content with the C43. I posted a video of me picking up the C43, and that video kind of blew up, and I thought to myself, wow, I could actually do this. I could have a YouTube channel. And I just kept making videos, and they were doing quite well, and every time I made a video I just got better and better, and got better equipment, and got more comfortable on camera. And this was when I just sat down and thought to myself, God, if you just work really, really hard, you could buy any car. And I think that's where my finance rabbit hole reached a peak, where I was very deep, because I think the C43 must have been around £700 a month, which I couldn't have just gone into the dealership and said, hi, I'll have this car please, £700 a month. You kind of have to go through the rabbit hole process of going in and saying to yourself, oh, it's only an extra £100 a month, it's only an extra £200 per month. And then it doesn't really feel like you're making a big financial change, because if you've been working hard, you're normally earning more per month when you come to the decision to get the new car. So it's completely justifiable, but of course it can be very dangerous. And then if you follow my channel, you'll know my cars from then. I had the C43 for 3 years, absolutely loved it, an amazing car. It really got me into the Mercedes brand, particularly the AMG brand, and we had so much fun with that car. And then afterwards we got the CLA45s, which was another incredible car, and the CLA45s was just under £800 per month, so it didn't feel like a huge jump from the C43 in terms of costs. And then of course we have the Aston Martin Vantage, which we're sitting in here now, and this video is about really. And of course this car was way more money than all of those per month, and it was a pretty bold decision getting it. But owning the CLA45s, getting in that car every morning and driving to work, the amount of motivation that car gave me to just work harder, earn more money, start businesses, so I can eventually buy my dream supercar, which is what this is. You know, once you kind of get a taste and you realize that it's actually physically possible, the amount of motivation that gives you is unreal. And that's why, for me, the car finance rabbit hole was one of the best things that could ever happen to me. I like to think there are two roads people take when they follow the car finance rabbit hole. One is the good turn, and the other is the bad turn. And the good turn can be really, really good, but the bad turn can be really, really bad. First, let's talk about the good turn, which luckily happened to me. When I bought my first car on finance, I was so motivated to work hard, not just to afford the thing, but so I could move my way up the ladder of cars. I was always thinking about the next best car and how I could get there. And every day I drove to work in the morning, I drove my car and I was smiling and thinking, you've got to work hard to afford this thing, but if you want an even better car, you've got to work really hard. And words can't describe just how motivating that has been for me over the past 10 years. And now for the bad turn, and you guys can probably see this coming. Most car salesmen are going to try really hard to sell you a car on finance, and the sad truth is they don't care. Well, some of them, not all of them, don't care if you can't actually afford the car. They just want to drive numbers and drive sales and get you in the car. And the thing with cars is they are incredible machines. So if you test drive a car like this or any fun car, you're going to be on huge emotional levels, and it's going to give you that impulse to just buy it, and that's something you have to be so careful with. And the problem is, if you find yourself in a car that you can't afford the monthly payments on, you're of course in serious debt, and you can't just give it back because of the depreciation. You're going to lose thousands of pounds. So what tends to happen is it gets worse and worse and worse, and some people find themselves getting in even more debt because they have to get loans or other finance just to cover the payments to keep the car. And this really is a very vicious rabbit hole to fall down. This is of course not to say you shouldn't buy a car on finance though, because as you heard from my story, buying a car on finance was one of the best decisions I ever made. The amount of motivation I used to get, getting up in the morning, going to work in my car, thinking about working hard, working my way up the ladder so I can afford the next better car on the next finance deal, really was a huge game changer for me. And I honestly don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for car finance. So if you're someone thinking about buying your first car on finance, here's my honest advice. The first thing you need to check is, can you afford, of course, the monthly payments of the car, because they are the biggest expense. But don't cut it to the wire. Don't say, oh, I can just about afford this car, because then you might find yourself in a bad place later down the line. You have to take into account the additional costs of owning the car, even things like fuel, but tires, insurance, servicing and general maintenance. They're going to soon add up. So if you can only just afford the monthly payments, it could really catch you out, and before you know it, you could be taking the wrong turn down the car finance rabbit hole. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. It was really fun for me to go through the history of my cars and how we got from there to here. And I would love to hear yours too. If any of you guys found yourself down the car finance rabbit hole over the years, post in the comments below and tell me about all the cars you own. I'd love to hear your journeys. And of course guys, with car finance, it's really important, like I said in the video, to be responsible and only buy a car if you know you can 100% afford it. You know, it can be tricky sometimes because we buy cars on emotion because they are amazing machines, but we have to remember to be responsible. So please guys, take this video with a pinch of salt and only buy your dream car if you can absolutely afford it. And if you can't, work really hard, because I'm sure in time, with hard work, you'll get there. Thank you so much for watching guys. I'll see you next time.